Jalen Ramsey is officially, I don't know if you'd say on the trading block, but the news has come out that the Rams are open to trading Jalen Ramsey. And this is, again, pretty crazy because Jalen Ramsey, top 3 corner in the league, top 5 corner in the league, whatever you want to call him. We know that he plays well. He's got himself kind of an island over there. You can bring him in to protect the run. They obviously have also cut Bobby Wagner, which is very crazy to me. Best linebacker in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. Clearly been a legend, is a legend in the making, only a decade in the NFL, not asking for a whole lot of money. He's cut as well. And this all comes after really just 2 years removed from the Super Bowl. Bad Super Bowl hangover. Matthew Stafford was injured, might have to have Tommy John surgery. Sean McVay did say he's coming back, so that is good, but we will have to see what's going to happen with the Rams. And it looks like that they could be looking to close up shop here. So we're also going to talk about some destinations for Jalen Ramsey as well. But, again, it's just wild to know that Bobby Wagner, one of the best linebackers in the league, Jalen Ramsey, one of the best corners in the league, Wagner's gone. They mutually parted ways. They didn't cut him, but looking to shop Jalen Ramsey. Let's go ahead and start with it. The Cincinnati Bengals, I think, would be a great landing spot for Jalen Ramsey. They were 23rd in defensive pass yards last year, just a little over 229 given up per game. I think they needed an elite corner at the end of the day. Now, they do have secondary players the secondary players that are outside of Jesse Bates. Von Bell is pretty average. Eli Apple is pretty average. I'm sure the Bengals fans are going to roast me for saying that, but I watched both of those guys play in New Orleans. Darby, I know you did as well for a short time. They're not very impressive. I wouldn't depend on them in bigger plays, in big moments to actually come through. And maybe they have before, but I'm not going to depend on them on a consistent basis. And I've seen enough of their play. I know Ramsey would easily be the cornerback 1 here. And this would improve this defense drastically for a Bengals team that is put themselves into the conversation. A lot of hype around Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Zach Taylor is making a name for himself. We know what the Bengals are going to do and what they're coming to do in the NFL. I think the Chiefs will be a great landing spot for Jalen Ramsey as well. The Chiefs were 18th in defensive pass yards per game last year, and they have a pretty young secondary, but they're not too bad. They're fairly solid with the likes of Juan Thornhill. You got L'Jarius Sneed, the rookie, and Trent McDuffie, who wasn't too bad out of Washington. And then, of course, you have Justin Reed as well. I believe he's a safety, if I'm not mistaken. And you've got Jalen Ramsey, again, a veteran going into his 8th year, and he has been elite at times throughout his career. More often than not, he's been an elite corner in the NFL, unlike these other guys. And that's not a shot at them. But, and again, it's probably funny to hear me say, oh, this will be a great landing spot for the Chiefs who just won the Super Bowl. But it doesn't mean that the Chiefs are perfect just because they won a championship. And I know for a fact if the Chiefs could work out a deal with Jalen Ramsey, they would put him on paper today. Now, the next one for me, which I think would be awesome. Some might not agree because it's going to be two pretty big players at the same position on the same team. Talking about the New York Jets here, who were great in the NFL. They were 3rd in pass yards, defensive pass yards per game last year. So that was definitely a positive takeaway. Want to get back into the chat. Eli Apple equals burnt toast. 100% agree, Darby. You already know what Eli Apple didn't do in those New Orleans days. But again, the Jets are 3rd in defensive pass yards per game. And I know they have Sauce Gardner, but Jalen and Sauce on opposite ends, I think would just be really a top elite secondary in the NFL. And again, a veteran presence for a very young budding team with a young head coach. Also, a lot of energy. You feel like the culture is turning around. Jalen Ramsey, I really feel like would complement that Robert Saleh energy as well, because we've heard Jalen Ramsey in his Jags days, one of the best smack talkers out there. He kind of calmed it down when he came over to the Rams, but he can jab. We know that he can jab with guys either way. So the Jets would be solid. Not that they need it, but it would be a solid landing spot. I'm going to also mention the Ravens, who were the 7th worst in the NFL last year, 26th overall out of 32 teams in defensive pass yards per game. And the reason I say this might be a shock to some people because I know the Ravens have been riddled with injuries over the last couple of years, especially in the running back and the secondary room. And that's a reason why I am actually coming forward and putting this out here, is because Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters have been banged up in those recent years. And even though, even though they have been banged up, I know they've been coming back. They've been playing as solid as they can, but the passing game or the passing defense has still looked bad. And Jalen Ramsey, I know, would supplement very nicely. You rotate these guys in and out, however you could work them in. Jalen Ramsey plays that smash mouth defense. Again, he's a talker, high energy. He knows how to play well. And he would just really complement this Ravens secondary that stands for a big time defensive culture. Another team I think that would be great for Jalen Ramsey would be the Miami Dolphins. They're 27th in defensive yards per game this past year, which was the sixth worst, so just right below the Ravens. Xavier Howard, as we call him for short, X Howard, of course, he could use a nice counter on the opposite side of the field in him, in Jalen Ramsey. And of course, Jalen Ramsey played in Florida before, coming out of Florida State, so he would be familiar, maybe not with the Miami area, but he's been in the state before, so maybe it would kind of be some roots to bring him back to the team. But the Dolphins are a loaded team offensively. We know about that. We saw what Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Tua were kind of doing for that short amount of time before, unfortunately, Tua fell apart, in front of our eyes with the concussions. But they need some defensive help, as not only were they sixth worst in defensive pass yards per game, they were ninth worst in defensive points per game as well. And again, the Dolphins are a team that I feel like, the last few years, like we saw them miss the playoffs going 10-6, I believe, a couple years back into his rookie year. The year after that, they just shortly missed the playoffs as well. So this is a team that, I'm not saying Jalen Ramsey takes him over the top and secures them a playoff spot, but I feel like they are on that verge, kind of like, well, not even kind of like the Bengals, because the Bengals just really came out of nowhere. But you've got those teams that are teetering and they're on that verge of getting that respect. They're in the media. We know what they're capable of. I mean, they were scoring like the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bengals, essentially, the Dolphins were, through the first few weeks and months of the season before, obviously, things happened with Tua. So bringing Jalen Ramsey over, I think would be absolutely major for them. I'm going to also hit you guys with one as well. The team that drafted Jalen Ramsey, I think would be a great team to return to. The Jags, like I said, they're going to be in the show a good bit today, and the Jags are definitely a team. Again, they're on the verge. They know they've got Trevor Lawrence. That was a home run. Doug Peterson just won a Super Bowl 5-6 years ago with the Eagles, so that's a home run. The defense could be better, but bringing Jalen Ramsey back in, again, Jags fifth worst in defensive pass yards per game last year. This is the team who drafted him. He could even be a mentor to a young guy like a Tyson Campbell, who is out of Georgia, fifth in the NFL in pass breakups last year. Speaking there of Tyson Campbell, you got some Georgia boys next to Tyson Campbell, or a Georgia boy rather, in Trayvon Walker. You got the defensive lineman in Josh Allen. You got Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd. So this is a young team who seems like that they're ready to take that new team arriving type of role. Again, like the Bengals kind of have lately, but it's just time for them. Well, not just time for them, but the Jags pursuing Jalen Ramsey can be very, very beneficial to them. And again, just bringing him back home. He played at Florida State, going to play in Jacksonville. So I'm not saying he wants to get out, but it would not be a bad spot for him. And then the last team, which is kind of a no-brainer, don't know if he would go here, just because I don't know if, the Vikings are necessarily like we know they're not a Super Bowl contender. We saw the one-score games that they were kind of back and forth year. But nonetheless, they were second worst in defensive pass yards per game last year, and they might be losing Patrick Peterson in free agency, which could be major. So this one feels like a no-brainer again. And the Vikings offense was promising last season. Again, we saw a lot of the one-score close games. Kirk Cousins is solid. He's not a guy that's going to get you to, maybe it's a title game, maybe at the most it's a title game, but I don't see a Super Bowl appearance, let alone a win. So that's why I'm like, would Jalen Ramsey go here? Feel kind of tough for Vikings fans because, again, I know the team is solid. It's really crazy that the defense was as good as it was just a few seasons back with a Harrison Smith, with those linebackers, with those defensive ends. And it just, kind of went away quickly. But hey, the NFL stands for not for long. And I was also going to compliment maybe the Steelers as well. That would be nasty. On the other side of Cameron Sutton, obviously behind TJ Watt, you got some other good linebackers out there. Minka Fitzpatrick would be, behind him. So, there's a lot of places that Jalen Ramsey can get to. And maybe this is why the Rams are doing this, right? The more we talk about this trade. And I felt like I was pretty picky with the teams that I went through with. And hey, these guys are going to be the ones that could trade for Jalen Ramsey. But yeah. Jalen Ramsey has a lot of landing spots. Maybe the Rams see that. Maybe they think they are as far out as they really are because of how the Super Bowl hangover played out. I don't really know. It is what it is, though, nonetheless.